Good afternoon. This is Kent Blaylock with SDG Bible Study. That's the Soli Deo Gloria Bible Study coming to you on this Friday afternoon, March the 8th, 2024. I hope everyone is doing well and ready for this reading from the Robert Murray M'Cheyne one-year reading plan, as we're going to have an afternoon reading, and I'm excited to be getting into it, and I hope you will join me. Join me as we read together. Exodus chapter 21. Now these are the judgments which you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years. But on the seventh he shall go out as a free man without payment. If he comes alone, he shall go out alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then he shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out as a free man, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door of the doorpost. Then his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him permanently. And if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have the authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his treachery to her. And if he designates her for his son, he shall do to her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes for himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. And if he will not do these three things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint you a place to which he may flee. If, however, a man acts presumptuously toward his neighbor so as to kill him by deceit, you shall take him even from my altar, that he may die. And he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. And he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And if men contend with each other, excuse me. And if men contend with each other, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die, but remains in bed, if he gets up and walks around outside on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He shall only pay for his loss of time, and he shall take care of him until he is completely healed. And if a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and he dies at his hand, he shall surely be punished. But if for a day or two he is able to stand, no punishment shall be taken, for he is his property. And if men struggle with each other and strike a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet there is no injury, he shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband will set for him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, bruise for bruise, wound for wound. And if a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and ruins it, he shall let him go free on account of his eye. And if he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let him go free on account of his tooth. And if an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall go unpunished. If, however, an ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, yet he does not confine it, and it puts a man or woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If a ransom is demanded of him, Then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is demanded of him. Whether it gores a son or a daughter, it shall be done to him according to the same judgment. If the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall give his or her master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. And if a man opens a pit, or if a man digs a pit and does not cover it over, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead animal shall become his. And if one man's ox hurts another's, so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide its price equally. And also they shall divide, the dead ox, or if it is known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has not confined it, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead animal shall become his. Now to Luke chapter 24. Now on the first day of the week at early dawn, they came to the tomb bringing the spices which they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. And it happened that while they were perplexed about this, behold, two men suddenly stood near them in dazzling clothing. When the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living one among the dead? He is not here, but he has risen. Remember how he spoke to you while he was still in Galilee, saying that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again?" And they remembered his words, and when they returned from the tomb, they reported all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Now Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the rest of the women with them were there. They were telling these things to the apostles. But these words appeared to them as nonsense, and they were not believing them. But Peter stood up and ran to the tomb. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen wrappings only, and he went away by himself, marveling at what had happened. And behold, two of them were going that same day to a village named Emmaus, which was 60 stadia from Jerusalem. And they were conversing with each other about all these things which had happened. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself approached and was going with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are these words that you are discussing with one another as you are walking?" And they stood still, looking sad. And one of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus, the Nazarene, who was a mighty prophet in deed and word in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since these things happened." But also some women among us astounded us. When they were at the tomb early in the morning and not finding his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just exactly as the women also said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, "O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe in all the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and to enter his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. And they approached the village where they were going, and he acted as though he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. And it happened that when he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it, and after breaking it, he was giving it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us? They stood up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem and found gathered together the 11 and those with them, who were saying, the Lord has really risen and has appeared to Simon. And they were relating their experiences on the road and how he was recognized them by them in the breaking of the bread. Now, while they were telling these things, he himself stood in their midst and said to them, peace to you. But being startled and frightened, they were thinking that they were seeing a spirit. And he said to them, why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. And when he had said this, he showed him his hands and his feet. And while they still were not believing because of their joy and were still marveling, he said to them, have you anything here to eat? They gave him a piece of a broiled fish, and he took it and ate it before them. Now he said to them, these are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. And he said to them, thus it is written, that the Christ would suffer and rise again from the dead the third day, and that repentance for forgiveness of sins would be proclaimed in his name to all the nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things. And behold, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you, but you are to stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high. And he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. And it happened that while he was blessing them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they, after worshiping him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple, blessing God. Now to Job, chapter 39. Do you know the time the mountain goats give birth? Do you keep watch over the calving of the deer? Can you count the months they fulfill, or do you know the time they give birth? They kneel down, they bring forth their young, they send out their labor pains. Their children become strong, they grow up in the open field. They leave and do not return to them. Who sent out the wild donkey free, and who loosed the bonds of the swift donkey? From whom I have set the desert plain as a home, and the salt land as his dwelling place. He laughs at the tumult of the city, the shoutings of the driver he does not hear. He explores the mountains for his pasture and searches after every green thing. Will the wild ox consent to serve you, or will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind the wild ox in a furrow with ropes, or will he harrow the valleys after you? Will you trust him because his power is great and leave your labor to him? Will you believe him that he will return your seed of grain and gather it from your threshing floor? The ostrich's wings flap joyously, but are they the pinion and plumage of a stork? For she leaves her eggs to the earth and warms them in the dust, and she forgets that a foot may crush them, or that a wild beast of the field, or that a beast of the field may trample them. She treats her children cruelly, as if they were not hers. Though her labor be empty, she is without dread, because God has made her forget wisdom and has not given her a share of understanding. When she raises herself up high, she laughs at the horse and his rider. Do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like a locust? His splendid snorting is terrible. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his power. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at dread and is not dismayed, and he does not turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, the flashing spear and the javelin. With shaking and rage, he races over the ground, and he does not stand still at the sound of the trumpet. As often as the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" And he scents the battle from afar, and the thunder of the commanders, and the shout of lords of and the shout of war. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars, stretching his wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle goes on high and raises his nest high? On the cliff he dwells and lodges, upon the rocky crag, a fortress. From there he spies out food. His eyes see it from afar. His young ones also suck up blood. And where the slain are, there he is. And now to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. For it is superfluous for me to write to you about this ministry to the saints. For I know your readiness, of which I boast about you to the Macedonians, that Achaia has been prepared since last year, and your zeal stirred up most of them. But I have sent the brothers in order that our boasting about you may not be empty in this case, so that, as I was saying, you may be prepared, lest if any Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to speak of you, be put to shame in this certainty of ours. So I regarded it necessary to encourage the brothers that you would go on ahead, that they would go on ahead to you and arrange beforehand your previously promised blessing, so that the same would be ready as a blessing and not as a begrudging obligation. Now this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows with blessing will also reap with blessing. Each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make every grace abound to you, so that in everything at every time, having ever sufficiency, you may have an abundance for every good deed. As it is written, he scattered abroad, he gave to the needy, his righteousness stands forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in everything for all generosity, which through us is bringing about thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of this service is not only fully supplying the needs of the saints, but is also abounding through many thanksgivings to God. Because of the proven character given by this ministry, they will glorify God for your obedience to your confession of the gospel of Christ and for the generosity of your fellowship toward them and toward all, while they also, by prayer on your behalf, long for you because of the surpassing grace of God on you. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. And that is going to conclude our reading this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed this reading as we got to hear some laws being given to Moses from God and to the people. Then in Luke, we read of our resurrected Lord, his walking on the road to Emmaus with two of his disciples, and then him appearing to them all in the 11, and just appearing in their midst, and then his ascension into heaven. In Job, we're still hearing from God as he's questioning Job on, okay, where were you, Job? And he's bringing all these queries to him that he has no answer for. And then in 2 Corinthians, we see Paul's encouraging words to the church in Corinth and his commendation of them for their generosity. Hope you've enjoyed this reading, and I hope you'll enjoy this weekend that is upon us, and that you will give God the glory in it. Soli Deo Gloria.